I have to tell you, I could not let my mother attend this talk today. For her to be present while I talk about sex was going to break our mother-son covenant. We didn't talk about sex in our house when I was growing up. In fact, I learned about the birds and the bees from a pamphlet my pediatrician gave me. And from my neighbor's older brother, who at 16 years old seemed to be some sort of neighborhood oracle, bringing sexual truth to the pubescent masses. We still don't talk about sex. In fact, we don't really talk about sex in our culture much, do we? At least publicly. In fact, sex is one of those great 3 taboo topics, along with religion and politics, which we're taught from a young age to avoid in polite conversation. I don't think it's coincidence that about every ill in our society ties back to sex, religion, and politics. We have relegated sex to the dark corners of back alleys, illuminated only by the flickering screen of internet porn and the red lights of strip clubs. Porn may titillate, but I think most would agree that it's a bit superficial, a bit cold, a bit distant. We have made sex dirty, wicked, profane. That's why we hide it. That is, unless we're trying to sell something. And then it's right in your face, whether it's underwear or trash cans. Sex is an inherently intimate act. Yet commercialization, pornography, and general public discomfort has not only created a peculiar cultural relationship with sex, but with intimacy as well. We have so exclusively connected sex and intimacy together that the value of other types of deep, open, and respectful relationships has been all but lost. The challenge we face today is not that we won't talk about sex. That's simply symptomatic. Our challenge is that we're losing our ability to relate to others intimately outside of a sexual relationship. This includes not only friendships, but relationships with colleagues and supervisors, employees, neighbors, community members, and even our adversaries. A life without intimacy is superficial, it's shallow, it's insincere. A life without intimacy is without benevolence, compassion, and dare I say, humanity. Without intimacy, we cannot react with others with the depth necessary for genuine discourse. The kind of discourse that allows us to address complex and important social, environmental, and economic issues. We see the results of this every day, don't we? In the morning, corporations talk about the importance of keeping great employees. In the afternoon, they announce job cuts. In the morning, state legislators talk about the importance of having good teachers for our children. In the afternoons, they announce cuts to school funding. In the morning, Congress talks about bipartisanship. And in the afternoon, they let the government shut down. At best, decisions are fitful. See the Affordable Health Care Act. At worst, non-existent. See Social Security reform. Decisions are no longer the result of engaged discourse marked by open and honest communication. Decisions are made out of fear. Will our shareholders push me out? Will I get elected next year? Will I lose my job? Will I go broke? Will I be rejected? Will I be lonely? Will anybody give a damn about me? The results are decisions that lack compassion, kindness, thoughtfulness, not to mention logic and reason. We need to rethink the level of intimacy with which we approach others, and in doing so, rethink what it means to be human. We are, by our very nature, intimate creatures, whether we're extroverts or introverts. We crave human connection. Intimacy recenters our humanity. Intimacy is not easy. Someone earlier said, I'm coming to your talk because I have some problems with intimacy. Well, unfortunately, there's no 12-step program to being more intimate. And the cost can be high, but the rewards are very, very great. Intimacy starts with self-awareness. That's been a challenge for me for all of my life. About a decade ago, this faced me right and hit me right in the heart. A friend of mine was having a hard time, and he had turned to self-medication through alcohol. He had struggled with alcohol for years, and he was in a full alcoholic tailspin. The apex was on a Saturday morning when he called me and he said, "Well, I'm done." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "I'm ready to die. I'm ready to be gone." I hopped in my car and I ran over to his house. I threw his emotional baggage on my back and I put him in the passenger seat, and we headed to the hospital. And halfway there, he opened the door and started to jump out. I held on to the steering wheel. I reached over, grabbed the door, I put my elbow into his chest, and we drove like that the rest of the way to the hospital. I was going to save him. I was his best friend. I'm a fixer. That's what we do. I could make it better for him. The hospital got him through detox, and there's no fairy tale ending here. It was an up and down for weeks. I put thousands of dollars in to help him. I'd let him move into my house, only for him to move out and back in and out, until finally in spring, he called me and left a message and said, "I want to move back in." And this time I said no. That was the hardest decision I ever made in my life. He would be homeless that night and 2 more. But I finally realized that I didn't have the strength. I didn't know who I was well enough to be able to support him and support me. And moreover, self-awareness is also about taking control of self and being responsible for self. Now, I'm glad to tell you that my friend has had a better time now, and he's almost 10 years sober. And he told me just this last Christmas that he said, as hard as that day was, and he remembers it as well as I do, he said, "You put it back in my hands." And I took control again. That was, to be able to find ourselves in that way is tough. I still struggle with this today. I have to daily self-examine my emotions, my thoughts, and my actions. And at the same time, have to be sure that I'm not blaming everybody else for whatever my troubles are. We have to accept responsibility for who we are and do so without slipping into victimization or martyrdom. And we have to understand that we are not the center of the universe, but part of a larger community. This is hard work. It has good rewards. Intimacy requires openness and honesty. One of the very best and most intimate friendships I have started over coffee with an unexpected level of openness. We talked about everything, from our health to relationships. We lifted up our shirts and showed our scars. I did not, as a friend of mine says, Dr. Frazier him. I can be a pretty formal person sometimes when meeting people for the first time. I've always believed that there are public and private personas. I believe strongly that there are conversations we have with friends that are different from conversations we have in public. There are words I say in private that I don't say in public. And this is where my work begins. Because that's an inheritance of 40 years of trying to control people's perceptions of me. What a foolish and ridiculous endeavor on my part. I work daily to be more open and honest in my communications so the people that I'm intimate with actually know me. We have to start by saying what we want. Not being who we are is a kind of death. Sometimes we can be afraid that we're going to offend people if they know who we are, that we'll cause them discomfort. Well, thank God that Dr. King, Ms. Parks, and President Mandela weren't concerned about that. They were concerned about the greater cause and knowing that in a real conversation, in an intimate relationship, we can get through those elements. And in being open and honest with others, we have to give them the space for them to be open and honest. We can't get caught up in our own judgments. As someone who's been in higher education for 20 years, the conversation this morning on souls and MOOCs is a bit of an itch for me. It was hard at times for me to listen. And I had to stop and say, put that down. Listen to what he has to say. Don't let your old prejudices guide you for the future. We have to be open to hearing what others have to say. Imagine if our leaders sat down on Monday to discuss immigration reform and were actually open and honest with each other. I'm afraid if I vote for immigration that I'll lose my base. I support immigration reform because I am the daughter of an immigrant. I'm scared of people that don't look like me. I'm an immigrant, and I came in legally. Why should I support them? It's messy. It's dirty. But what a foundation for genuine discourse to get to real solutions and real answers. And with openness and honesty comes vulnerability. Life is about risk. If we don't take risk, failure is 100% guaranteed. The blockade to being vulnerable is fear. Our fight or flight mechanism is strong, but it's very primitive. Frankly, it's really designed to prevent us from being eaten by other creatures. It is not designed to evaluate complex situations. Fear prevents us from making good decisions. Good decisions are possible, they're just not probable. Many years ago, nightly on the news, we would see the video of Rodney King being beaten by officers from the Los Angeles Police Department. And it was always overlaid with anchor commentary such that we saw the picture, but we didn't hear the action. But when you listen to the video, you hear the commander of the police unit saying, "Stand down, stand down, stand down, stand down." But the officers seemed to not hear him. Our assumption was they were ignoring him. But we actually now know they weren't ignoring him. They literally didn't hear him. Malcolm Gladwell in his book Blink talks about how under extreme stress we can experience tunnel vision, diminished sound in a sense that time is slowing down. That doesn't mean we lose responsibility for our actions, but it means that we have to put the time and the energy to fight those fears. Because when we are so fearful, so stressed, we lose our ability to make good decisions. Unbridled fear leads to bad decisions. And managing fear is not innate. It's not born in us. It is completely a learned action. What fears are clouding your judgment today? How am I going to pay for school next semester? What am I going to do when I graduate? Do people know I'm gay? I hate my job, but if I quit, how will I survive? Will anybody ever love me? Being vulnerable is about acknowledging, understanding, and confronting our fears. And that is so much easier said than done. But it is amazing when you think about the fears that you have exposed to the light, how much less power they have over you. Ignorance is the soil in which fear grows. And the only way that we can dispel ignorance is to listen and to learn. And while we know it's important that we have our own stories, like I said, we have to be open to hearing others as well. We have two tendencies often in conversation. One is to not listen because we're thinking about what we're going to say next. The other is that we may listen, but we're actually writing the other person's narrative in our head. How many times have you totally blocked out someone in a conversation because you're crafting what you're going to say next? You want to look sharp. You want to look insightful, but you have no idea what the person said. And maybe you're like me and you can write other people's narratives for them. The other day, I sent a text. I didn't hear back. An hour passed. I still didn't hear back. Another hour passed. I didn't hear back. Why is he mad at me? Why is he not returning my text? A couple more hours go by. I'm like, I couldn't get another friend. Well, she must be with him. I bet they're having dinner without me. Why the hell are they having dinner without me? 8 hours pass, and I am pretty steamed. And then I get the call. Hey, Kevin, I just got your text. Man, my phone died, and I didn't have my charger with me. We write our own narratives, and we have to be careful to not do that. If we don't listen, then ours becomes nothing but a monologue. It is in dialogue that life really happens and community is built. And that brings us to the foundation upon which all intimate relationships must exist, and that's respect. Mutual respect leads to mutual understanding and leads to mutual benefit, formerly known as compromise. We've gotten so stuck on the secondary definition of compromise to weaken. Compromise isn't about being weak. Compromise, in fact, is the greatest of all the strengths. It is a strength that we can develop and enact together solutions to our mutual benefit. Intimate relationships are symphonic. At times, certain instruments lead, but the real music comes from the interplay of all the instruments together in concert. Tom Spanbauer describes this well in his coming-of-age novel, The Man Who Fell in Love with the Moon. The lead character, Shed, describes what sex has taught him about life. First thing off is you got to know you got a story. Then you got to tell it. Knowing how to tell your story good is important, but the secret to good sex is how well you listen. Sex is only good when the two stories start becoming the same story, the human being story. When two bodies stop being two bodies, the one heart beating. Good sex is bartering, wrestling, swapping tales back and forth, and telling lies until you find the truth. Intimacy is about owning our stories, sharing our stories, and listening to the stories of others. That's what today's been all about, sharing our stories. Speaker after speaker has gotten up here today, taken off all that protects them, and stood before you naked, risking rejection, to share their deepest thoughts and their most remarkable ideas. Tonight you can go home and say, well, that was nice. TEDxUNCAsheville. Or you can pick up the phone as soon as you walk out of this auditorium and ask your friends to meet you downtown, at your apartment, or your dorm room, because you've learned an idea that's worth sharing. And not only can you share what you've learned, but then with openness and honesty and vulnerability, you can share with them your own ideas. And with deep respect, turn to them and ask, what do you think? With intimacy, you will get burned. Hurt is guaranteed. You will fail. And you will succeed. And you will find great joy, deep fulfillment, and a life truly worth living. Then, and only then, will the real truths